Okay, it's official. We are very much in the final sprint to Election Day. And face it, between debates, polling releases, even court appearances, it can feel exhausting, even impossible to keep up with. I'm Brad Milkey. I'm the host of Start Here, the daily podcast from ABC News. And every morning, my team and I get you caught up on the day's news in a quick, straightforward way that's easy to understand, with just enough context so you can listen, get it, and go on with your day. So, kickstart your morning. Start smart with Start Here and ABC News, because staying informed shouldn't feel overwhelming.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Now that the frost is getting close, the freeze is coming, it's time to get it going. It's a sad time of year, but it's also a breath of fresh air, I think. We've got a list of things to do to prepare for your frost, to really get your fall gardens going in past and through the frost, so we can now officially start our season extension, right, Batavia?
Season extension.
Yep. That's what it's all about, though.
Well, the next episode on the Backyard Gardens podcast will discover Batavia is already preparing for next year. But no, we're here now.
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother thing where I'm sure there is a lot of people listening to the show right now that are preparing for next year as we speak, which I think is good. I mean, that's the whole point of what we do, right? We're always 1 to 2 steps ahead. But we've got a list here, as I said earlier, that will kind of help us to get ready for our first frosts and get into our first freezes. It's not necessarily going to save all of your crops, calling out the people who are still growing tomatoes and peppers and stuff like that with a frost inbound. It's not really going to protect those and help them. But for people who are growing cool season varieties for the fall, this will help you go further into it and protect them as we get in. And even though they can take a frost and even a freeze, the more gentle transition we have into it, the better it's going to be for them. Right?
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear. What does hear, hear mean? If you think about it, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I agree.
I hear it all the time, but and before we get started, if you want to support the show, please check out the Backyard Gardens podcast. Well, actually, never mind. Don't check it out because you're listening to it. Become a subscriber, a patron, pick up some seeds. We just got our seeds for next year in, so we will be getting those ready in due time. So get ready for that. And we will be announcing a couple other things related to the seeds. And get the planter app. The planter app, that beautiful thing that has a square foot drop interface, drag and drop, color-coded, combative, companion plantings, all that stuff. Get that. Use it because it's on your tablet, your PC, and your phone. And it's a wonderful app. It organizes everything, tells you for thousands of varieties the ins and outs of it. And Batavia's flashing me her credit card for some reason right now. You want me to buy the app for you?
I was pulling up my planter app.
But as we get into the next planting season, we will be using this app more. This is where it really comes to shine. So check it out. It's available on your Google and Apple Play stores, and that's the planter app, the PLANTER. There's a link below that will get you a discount. I'm pointing like you can see me. Did it get you a discount? You don't believe me? Try it for free. But you're going to want it because it is amazing and it has definitely taken our gardens to the next level. Okay. So we're growing. Actually, we have a list made, but I do have to amend it a little bit. I forgot. And what do we have coming up in, let's say, 5 days? What's happening in 5 days? Our first frost is coming.
Is that on your schedule now?
No, I'm playing a game.
Oh, I'm all confused.
You poor thing.
Wait, hold on.
You poor, bless your heart.
You know what? I reject that. That may or may not have been me multitasking and like, all right, I'm going to wait for the pause.
Yeah.
Like, I've done this enough to know where you're going to pull me into the conversation.
I'm going to jump in. So
That's
no,
what I get.
You know, we're fast forwarding into the future. And in 5 days, we're going to have a frost. What do we do? What's your first step?
Well, I clear off room for my on my dining room table because there are going to be some things that are coming in that are going to need some space.
Yeah.
No, in all seriousness, frost is scheduled. I'm looking at the days before and the days after, so it's scheduled to come in 5 days. What's this weather like going ahead? Am I getting rain? Am I getting, some type of sleet or something? And then what's those next couple of days like afterwards, which are really important. So I'm kind of preparing myself with what the weather is going to be. Now there are things specifically that's like kind of getting your knowledge base together around what's about to happen. The dining room comment is directly tied to anything that's in the garden that I believe is tender, which the internet can give you a slew of crops that are tender. So there's no questioning around what's tender, what's not cold tolerant or cold hardy. I'm harvesting those things in the next 2, 3, 4 days.
Why did you have to say the I word?
Internet?
Yeah, why did you have to say that?
Okay, I have one better for you, the interweb.
Okay, I like to call it the outer net because it's the reason why is because you said depending on what the internet will tell you, you can get some really bad advice on what is a tender crop. The way I would look at it is a frost comes, that plant's done. That's tender. So what are you referring to harvesting? Just throw that out there.
So if a frost comes, clearly anything that's still for my summer plantings, I'm harvesting. So all of the kind of fruit bearing crops, depending on where, things like lettuce. So now we're getting into cool weather crops, but how tender are they? Things like lettuce, maybe if I have some bok choy or pak choy, depending on where they're planted, I may consider harvesting those as well. Another way to look at it is these are the cold hardy crops, and if it's not on that list, then maybe consider it tender. Why don't you tell us what you consider tender, young Ben?
Well, so it's actually, so to be totally honest, it's hard because there's only a couple things in my garden that are going to be frost tender, but it's basically anything that you grow in the middle of summer. Peppers, tomatoes, squashes, melons, okras, beans, stuff like that. Those are all frost tender, and meaning, you're going to go to bed and they're going to look fine, and then you're going to get up and they're going to look like crap. Versus, the other stuff that we've been preaching about planting this time of year, you're going to go to bed, they're going to look fine. You're going to get up and they're going to look fine, if not even better. So, and again, like there's a couple things in my garden that I will let go all the way till the end. But I mean, at this point, I've got 2 things I've got Seminole pumpkins and I've got a basil plant. And that's it. And so, my Seminole pumpkin, I'm now working on that. So I looked on it the other, dude, I had like 25 pumpkins on there the other day. So I went through and I harvested all the ones that were ready so that they could focus its energy. And I'm pulling all the small ones off now. And it's like, whatever's left, this is it. Focus on it. And when that frost comes, that should be done. So anything tender like that, you need to harvest because the fruit, it can get damaged. Usually the first frost isn't the hardest freeze. If it's buried in leaves, it could be protected. But you don't want to damage all that hard work for a frost, right? So
yeah. So from my experience, because I've had vegetables, not frost hardy, tender vegetables in the garden when the frost has come. I have, if it gets right at the level of frost, I have had peppers where there may be a little bit of fraying of the pepper leaves, but generally the pepper itself, the fruit is okay. Don't leave your peppers out there because I've said that, but I've noticed that. Or if I've done a big sweep of harvesting, I've been out, the floodlight over my garage is on because it's dark, me trying to pick peppers and tomatoes and all that stuff. Then you come out the next day and inevitably you would have missed a couple, right? And those peppers have been fine to bring back in. Tomatoes are a different monster. I have not seen in that same scenario tomatoes that are edible once they've been hit, with that frost. Even when they're green, clearly the plants look like crap, but the tomato is what I'm most concerned about.
Yeah.
Even when they're green, I've pulled green tomatoes in, kind of isolated them to see what was going to happen. And they kind of turn into like a rotting mush at some point.
Yeah,
So I
it's
would
like
never take any chances with those.
It's like they go bad really fast, right?
Yeah.
Like the internal of the tomato gets damaged, I would imagine. I've had the same thing. I've noticed, we eat green tomatoes a lot. And I've noticed that in the fall, as we get closer to the frost, the green tomatoes, they ain't hitting on much. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not worth it. So, you definitely want to try and, clear that stuff out. Prepare. And I mean, at this point, you're preparing for the inevitable, So, and the reason why I say, 5 days out is because that gives you some time. But, the tomatoes aren't ripening fast. None of these summer crops are really ripening that fast anymore. So you need to be a little bit ahead of it. And then if you get it out, all you got to do next is just pull the plant when it's time. Because once that frost hits it, that plant's done. You can bounce it back and you can go into what we're going to talk about next, but it's really just it's a waiting game at that point.
Yeah.
So, we've got our list kind of jacked.
Growing your business can mean big-time logistical questions, like how are we going to keep up with all these local deliveries? Let Uber Direct offer you a helping hand. With Uber Direct, you take orders on your website, app, or by phone. Then, drivers who are part of Uber's courier network pick them up from your store and deliver them to your customer's doorstep. Sounds simple, right? Delivery just got better with Uber Direct. Learn more at uberdirect.com.
Batavia. Actually, it doesn't really matter too bad.
Well, let me get in because I'm very clear on what the list has, even though my eyes are squinting because I've had very little sleep. And
mine aren't. I got
caffeine.
glasses. I'm good.
Yeah, right. I did have a full eye exam earlier this year, and I'm just wondering how much has changed in the last 6 months because
Bro, it happens
the
fast.
prescription I have is kind of like,
You wear glasses?
For distance.
Oh.
Yeah, so I should be fine sitting here looking at the screen. Cover plants. You need to cover your plants, right? For those that we're not talking about tomatoes. We're not talking about pepper. I'm not talking about tomatoes or peppers.
Let's be clear about this, though. Can you cover a tomato plant for a random frost? Like you're going to get 32 and then it's going to bounce back up to 50, 60 degrees. Do you think it's worth it to do that? And it's going to stay that way for, let's say, 10 days, because that's usually what the forecast will go out to. 10 days after that, there's not much in cold. Do you think that it's worth it to cover a tomato plant?
What's my temperature lows over the next 10 days? You said it's going to get back up to 50 or 60 degrees.
Let's say it gets back into the mid 40s, into maybe it'll bounce up into the 50s at night, warm during the days.
If somehow you find that you don't have enough time to harvest those tomatoes and you can actually cover it. I've never had tomatoes planted in a way and based on their growth that I could accurately cover them.
Yeah.
Just based on how big they get. Then give it a try. You're better off if I'm really frank, snipping the bottom of that, pulling it into a garage or a shed, like snipping at the root level, cutting the plant, dragging I've done this with pepper plant, the entire plant into a covered area where I can then later come back in and basically pick that fruit. The reason why I ask,
that's the lazy way of gardening. I like it. Like,
yeah,
I'm going to do this on my own terms.
Be careful with pulling those pepper plants into your house because there are a lot of things that come with them. But
Yeah.
I've done that before. It's like no sense in picking pepper after pepper after pepper. Take the entire thing. But the reason why I ask about the temperature afterwards is, what are you expecting from that plant when that temperature is going to be 40 to 60 degrees over the next 10 days?
Well,
Right? You're not getting red tomatoes.
So first of all, I was playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, no.
I thought you were like asking me.
No. So
But-
again, it's to what end?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I know people like that that watch Sandy Bottom Homestead on YouTube. Check it out. That are in Louisiana and stuff, and they will cover, and then they'll have 2-3 more weeks of no cold. So one person in particular commented on that the other day. They try to make them go as long as possible. The problem I have with covering tomatoes and eggplants and stuff like that is they're so big that you can't have the cover resting on top of the plant because that'll burn the outside leaves. So you need to have it, elevated over it. And I just have a struggle, just like you said, like I don't mind doing something like that if I felt like it was going to prolong for a period of time to where I would in fact get more of a harvest. So I don't do that, but I know there are people that do. But covering plants, this is if you've got something that you just got to get, you just really want to try, what's an appropriate cover for a frost?
I actually have defaulted to things like sheets, blankets, things that are not designed for the garden, but that have some, especially if it's not wet, right? So if it's not a frost that has snow coming with it, if it's not a frost that has rain coming with it, if it's not a frost that has sleet coming with it, then something like that. I've covered sweet potato vines, right? Some people have the theory of wait until that first frost hits it, but that's relative. Does the first frost come and then it dip way into freezing too in that same night?
Yeah.
So anywho, something that has a little bit of weight to it to cover those plants is what generally kind of that spot covering is for me, not like long-term cover for, the rest of the season. I've done those types of materials and then plastic on top of it, which probably is a little bit of overkill, no pun intended. Tip your waitresses and waiters, guys.
Way too clever.
So yeah, that's something that, and a lot of us have those things. Towels, like I'm not embarrassed. I have towels from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Clearly not appropriate bath towels anymore.
Whatever.
They've
It's
done
like
their job,
sandpaper
but
when you get out of the shower. I know.
Yeah.
I see your arms bleeding when you come on the show. That's why you always wear
great
long
for
sleeves.
cleanup, great for car washing, great for covering those frost tolerant vegetables.
Yeah.
See the change in the term there? Tolerant.
Yeah, I use blankets and towels mostly. I'm not doing a whole lot of covering though at this point, but what I am doing is I'm getting my actual covers prepared. As we get close to those days, I've got my structures in place. I've got my plastic cut. Typically it'll be rolled up on the side of the bed, just about ready to rock and roll at any moment. I can go out and throw a cover on because it seems to me it never fails. A frost will come and it's like it catches you by surprise, and it's like we'll go into periods like you keep mentioning a frost coming with sleet or snow. Is that common for you?
It could be,
Yeah.
So generally fall can be wet here for us. We had a super dry September and then we got like 4 inches of rain in, 2 days, over the course of 2 days. That's a lot of rain. If we talk about, and we're not going to get into, Ben's controversy around 1 to 1.5 inches of water a week that a lot of gardens can be just fine with. If you use that as a rule of thumb and we get 4 inches in a week, that's a lot of water, right? And so that's just September. And so things just get more and more damp. Temperatures are cooler. It's harder for things to dry. So that first bit of winter is coming could be with a heavier snow.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't ever have that. I mean, every time we get it, it's definitely a cool, and wet. And when I say wet, it's just like a really heavy dew. We'll have that, but I've never actually had like sleet or anything come with it here when I was in New England, yeah, we would get a frost and it would be, those big, fat, huge snowflakes or something coming. But it's important to realize as we get into this time of year that everybody's first frost and falls they look very different. Yeah. So we're trying to cover, a broad spectrum, and, Batavia's job on the show is basically for the northern tier. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's the southern tier. And so we try to find a happy medium between the two of us.
Reviewing my podcast co-host job description. Just a moment.
Amendment. Amendment.
That's probably one of the most important things that we've said thus far on this episode. The frost experience is different. Yeah. Depending on where you're gardening, right?
Absolutely.
Because we look at, how should I say, there are a couple of terms in the garden world that we generalize, right? Like knowing that they may happen at slightly different times, we still kind of treat them in the same way when we talk about them, right? And the reality is you and I, and we should do this. Leonard, let's chart out from the point of young Ben's first frost and my first frost, what our temperature is for the next 7 days. It's going to be a difference. I'm confident in that, a notable difference, right? And that's exactly why what's in your garden after a frost is different than what's in my garden after a frost,
Absolutely. And it makes a big difference too. So, keeping all of that into account, each person is going to deal with something different. Mm-hmm. And we, each person covering their garden is going to have to do it in a little bit of a different way. Mm-hmm. But we were talking about this before the show. Once you get in to this gardening game, and, a lot of you listening are longtime gardeners, but as you go through different seasons and repeated over and over, you start to realize like what steps you need to take and what steps you don't really need to take. Mm-hmm. And that's really important. And I think that's like, once you get to that point to where you understand, like I understand I don't need to put 6 mil plastic on my garden. Mm-hmm. You start to kind of tailor it to your needs. And that's a really important way to manage your garden, especially in this time of year. And going into the spring, not so much unless you are overzealous, which most of us are, as far as planting goes. But it's one of those things that, we can take care of and we can kind of keep on track with it. And knowing how to handle your garden is really, really important. So, especially when it comes to covering. So I don't have to do low tunnels constantly. I can do them off and on, where you need to do low tunnels. Once you start, you probably can't stop.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. I back in September, I mentioned in a video on Be Better Garden that I'd been talking about tomatoes because it was a different year for tomatoes. And we'll talk about this in future episodes when we reflect back on the year. But I'd said like, I'm, considering pulling these tomatoes. And I'm like, I know I've talked about this a bit this season, and that's not been my norm. Like, let's be very clear. Like, people that have listened to the podcast for the last few years know that I've been fighting tooth and nail. I want to let my tomatoes grow into Christmas here in Chicago, Illinois, because that makes sense, right?
Right.
But it's something that I've evolved to through dialogue with you, through paying more attention to these seasons year over year over year. It's like, I know for something like my tomatoes and other, frost tender plants that it's not going to survive the frost, but in my mind, there was some value in leaving these plants in for as long as possible. And it depends on the year. It depends on the plants. It depends on the gardener in that moment. This year, there was less value in that for me, when it comes to some of these plants. Now, when y'all hear this episode, I said this a couple of weeks ago, and I'm happy to say when the episode aired, I still had a couple of tomatoes in the garden. When you hear this episode, I may still have a couple of tomato plants in the garden. We'll see. But I think the idea of you will learn what you learned this year and apply it to next year, what you learn next year, and you'll go back the following year and apply what you've learned these last couple of years, and so on and so forth. This is where the experience of the gardener trumps everything you'll find on the interweb, to be quite frank.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's nothing that you can find on the internet that will help you more than experience. Absolutely nothing. There's nothing that we can say here that you can watch on YouTube, that you can read in a blog that will help you more. I agree. Damn, Batavia, you came onto this show and you were like, I'm tired. And it's like a flu-ridden Michael Jordan coming in and winning. I mean, what the hell's going on today?
What was that? Did he hit for 63 that time? Yeah.
I don't even follow sports, but I do know that. So, covering plants is, the step. And then the next thing is mulching. So mulching is not something that should be taken for granted. It's something that's really important because especially in Batavia's world, you can get frost heaving and stuff like that, which is simply where the ground gets frozen and then it thaws. And what it does is it heaves the plant out of the garden, out of the ground. And as we have these plants that we are growing that are very frost tolerant and freeze tolerant, I mean, it's not out of the ground tolerant. We're not growing air plants. They got to be in the soil. So the mulch really helps to, protect that. It's a protective barrier for it, and it will help keep it a little bit warmer as it does keep it a little bit cooler in the summer. And the reason why is because in the summer it shades it, and in the fall it insulates it. So it's another level of insulation, and it's a simple step that does not take long. I think mulching is one of the most important things you can do for a garden. Personally, there's a lot of things I say is one of the most important things, but that's way up on the list. Mulching, I think, is just something that we should not sleep on.
Yeah, it is. There are two things happening here. You're protecting, adding an additional layer of protection. I feel confident in describing it that way, to your planted garden. But then you're also, as we get into the later parts of the growing season, you're also just protecting your soil.
Yeah.
Right. So the thing that we sometimes take for granted is the impact that bare soil has on our kind of longer plan garden. And so the mulch, even though in some cases in my garden, it could go into, like right now as we record, everything is kind of damp.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's damp, not from, the rain, but really just from the coolness in the air. There is
the dew.
The level of dew that's, appeared early morning, and we're still early enough in fall where the sun's going to shine, if the sun comes out today, and it's going to dry things up. And we're going to go back through this tomorrow. But the later we get into the fall season, the more those things kind of stay cold and wet.
Right.
And so what you want is not just kind of a skimp of the actual mulch, but like a pretty hefty layer of mulch. Because what could happen is that very top layer is the thing that's damp and wet. But guess what? As you go a little bit further down, 2-3 inches down, there's a level of dryness and comfort for the plant.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say about mulch other than like take advantage of it. You know what I mean?
Other than what I just said, my whole diatribe.
Say what?
See, there's not much to say about mulch other than my whole diatribe.
Yeah, exactly. We've been recording this show early, right? And I've got this automation on this Alexa thing, and I turned it off, and it's doing it again. It makes me mad. I hate technology. Pisses me off. All right, so the next thing, and this seems counterintuitive, but hear us out. You know that a freeze is coming. What do? Water your plants. Now, does that mean you water the plants the night that it's going to freeze? Not necessarily, but you want to give them a nice deep watering a day before or something, because that will help the soil retain the heat more. It's kind of like, I'm trying to, like in my greenhouse, I have those water tanks, and they heat up during the day, and then they release the water, holds the heat longer and releases it the next day or over the night. Same thing here. You see it a lot in farms in like Florida, where the oranges will they'll be, going to get a freeze, and they will basically spray the entire tree to encapsulate it in ice, because that will help insulate that tree and in an effort to save the crop. So that's something that you can do as well. And it really does. It makes a difference. And it's typically not that big of an issue in the fall, because most places it is the wet season. We come into fall, the water is not evaporating as fast, but adding a little bit extra water in can really help. The key is afterwards, be mindful that water is going to be wet and it's not going to evaporate as fast, because we don't want to create root rot situation.
So when you get your frost,
Growing your business can mean big-time logistical questions, like how are we going to keep up with all these local deliveries? Let Uber Direct offer you a helping hand. With Uber Direct, you take orders on your website, app, or by phone. Then, drivers who are part of Uber's courier network pick them up from your store and deliver them to your customer's doorstep. Sounds simple, right? Delivery just got better with Uber Direct. Learn more at uberdirect.com.
Okay, it's official. We are very much in the final sprint to Election Day. And face it, between debates, polling releases, even court appearances, it can feel exhausting, even impossible to keep up with. I'm Brad Milkey. I'm the host of Start Here, the daily podcast from ABC News. And every morning, my team and I get you caught up on the day's news in a quick, straightforward way that's easy to understand, with just enough context so you can listen, get it, and go on with your day. So, kickstart your morning. Start smart with Start Here and ABC News, because staying informed shouldn't feel overwhelming.
remind me again, because Leonard's going to monitor it, but going into it, let's see how well. It's like pop quiz. Anyway, if anyone caught that movie reference, what I tried to avoid saying there. You can really face high temps after that first frost.
Me?
Because your first, yeah. And so,
not high temps, but higher temps. I mean, we typically don't get a frost and then bounce back up in the 90s, but we'll get a frost and bounce back up into the 80s or high 70s easily.
Yeah. And that's when we talk about like kind of you've watered these, deeply watered, right? These, the garden spaces. And now on the other side of it, what happens? Because depending on how bad things are, you could be faced with, how should I say, like a layer of, like kind of a layer of frozen mulch, it's so in your case, and generally speaking, like the temps are colder for me after that first frost, but generally we avoid like a full-on freeze. It's coming, you can look down the street and see it, but it's not necessarily that next day. So I don't have any issues when it comes to the whole practice of watering things, because you also don't know the next time you're going to get an opportunity to really water them. Just generally speaking, avoid leaves if you can when it comes to watering.
Yeah, because I mean, that's what will end up killing some of these plants is freezing the leaves. Which kind of, brings us into the next one. And you've gone through your frost. And typically, you'll go out and you'll say, hey, you'll go and you'll look at your lettuce and there's some burned leaves on it. You want to remove those. Okay. If they're burned, they're brown, they're soft, go ahead and cut them off and remove them, because what that does is that creates stress within your plant. The plant I'm acting like I know what the plant's thinking, but the theory is the plant looks at it and says, I need to repair this. Let me repair, and it'll start focusing its energy on those dead and dying parts. So if we remove that out of the equation completely, then the plant can say, hey, all I have is this wound now. We can continue growing. No issues. Let's move on. If we've covered, then you've avoided that especially with these cold tolerant, you've avoided that damage right out the gate. It's not even an issue. But if you hold off on it and you don't cover and you do have damage, you want to remove it. And this really goes further down the line to when your low tunnels are in place and you're starting to cover regularly and it's just getting colder and colder and you're getting that damage. Remove all that damaged stuff.
And that's just a part of, like, we don't have this as an item on our list, but this isn't the time. This is not the time to stay out of your garden.
No.
You know.
No, as a matter of fact, this is one of the, I don't know if it's one of the busier times. I mean, I feel like the busiest time is spring, you know, but I feel like it's like the last hurrah. You're going in and now you're starting to manage different things. But again, if we've planted appropriately, it's a lot easier to manage. You're always, there's a step down approach to each plant and it's frost hardiness, it's freeze hardiness. And some of those are going to have to take more, require more care than others, like your cabbages. I mean, whatever, you know what I mean? They're fine. You don't even really need to do much, but you need to stay on top of, the more tender varieties. When I say more tender, I don't mean the tender varieties. I mean the less of the frost hardy varieties. Okay. Are we good on that one?
I think we are.
Okay. I don't want to beat a dead horse. Root crops. Hard freezes now. We're getting into hard freezes. So we've gone through our gentle frosts. We've gone through our heavier frost. Now we're getting into it's cold. It's freezing. A lot of these, they are touted as crops that can basically be left in the ground as long as you want, so that you can use your ground as a refrigerator. And that is true up until a point. I find that point to be around 26 degrees without good recovery temperatures during the day. Now, again, if you're covering with a low tunnel, you are now expanding that even further by a couple weeks to a month, possibly. So that is possible, but we have to keep in mind that once we start getting these hard freezes, that we, getting down into the lower 20s, you can start to have these crops rot in the ground. They may look good up top, but when you pull them out, they're going to struggle and you're going to see damage on the roots. So we want to make sure that we don't have any major issues with those. And what we're referring to are carrots, turnips, beets, rutabagas, and that's really about it.
Yeah, and I'm going to actually take it one step further.
Oh.
And look at me stepping out one step further. So your frost hardy plants, right? So these are things that are going to be fine for many weeks to come after this first frost. The plants may or may not be kind of firm and stout after that frost. Depends on, again, did it dip into freezing temps as well, right? If you have plans to use, to consume, to, manage these plants, my infamous collard greens, I'll look when we open the episode, what do you do? I'm looking at the weather. If it's going to hit a frost, and those plants, generally speaking, will be fine if that weather dips down to more freezing. If that's happening over the course of a day, my plants are going to go limp. And then once the temperatures rise, they will perk back up. But what if I want to eat some collard greens between now and then? Yeah. Right. So sometimes I come in and do not necessarily a full harvest, but I'll harvest enough for me to use because I want to consume them between now and when temperatures stabilize. If I could use that term.
Yeah, I think, and fall is a very volatile time of year. For me, it seems like there's a step down approach to it, but at the same time, it can go and it can be steady, and then it can go either way. And then the closer you get to winter, it kind of, for me, it evens out a little bit. But then we get into January and it gets volatile again, and it's one of those things too, where you're harvesting root crops, but I don't want to just leave it at root crops here. I want to branch off into everything. As you start to get into frost, it freezes. We need to really think about like, hey, what are we doing with our crops? What is a realistic outcome of it? Is this collard plant going to make it through the whole winter? Well, I don't know. It's going to get pretty cold. Let me go ahead and harvest it so I make sure that I have something to eat. And I mean, I like doing that across the board with everything, even my cabbages, like, if you have an 18th century doorknob cabbage, go ahead and harvest it and enjoy it, because the last thing you want to do is necessarily take a chance and let it go. And it really comes down to like, what is going to be happening in the future within your garden. Mm-hmm. I saw you look to the side oddly. What was that about?
That's what I said. Booby traps.
Did I say the same thing you did?
I mean, the listeners will tell us.
Yeah, go ahead, tell us. Crucify me, it's okay. But it's, it's not necessarily that I think the plant's going to die. Also, it's just the fact, like, I want to ensure that I get something from my work. And I think that's really important, especially in this time of season.
This is where we get to the point of the infamous question now from last season about the pause with harvesting things. This was back in the spring garden, going into summer garden season. Like one of the gardeners and listeners talked about how she kind of has a habit of leaving things in the garden. And I remember saying, like, girl, I have some spinach right now that I should have harvested a week ago, And so now you fast forward to the end of the season, and I have the desire to prolong things hard stop. Insert any part of my life, but specifically with the gardening, like especially going into cold winters in Chicago, if I don't have plans, which I don't this year, of doing like a full-on winter garden, right? I'm not taking those steps yet. There will come an end to the things that are in my garden, and I'm already feeling nostalgic about it. And so I'm trying to prolong it. Like the moment you take any vegetable off of the plant, it changes, right? And so it's a clock when it comes to nutrition being lost, and how long it's going to store and all of those things. And so I've made it a habit to keep things on in the garden for as long as I can. But that's a game you're playing, So I have this morning before we recorded, and I said, okay, let me get my coffee, but also I pushed back to, 1:30 because I wanted to do a quick walk around the garden. And for sure I have, and this time everything digs in my garden around this time of year, but overnight digging, it's, I don't have to look back at the cameras. I know it's a raccoon, right? I'm looking at things like newly planted seedlings that I didn't provide any kind of netting to, like the spaces have been dug up. It's like, here we go, and so think about the potential of, is there something beyond weather that could damage what's in your garden? Like, what are we waiting for is something that I ask myself. Now, I'm not always obedient to that, thought, but, maybe you all will do better than I do.
Do you have a window in your garage? Mm-hmm. Do you have a battery operated radio?
Maybe. Okay,
well, first of all, you need to have a battery operated radio. If you don't have one, I will purchase one and send it to you just for emergency purposes. Feel free to let me know. I will be more than happy to buy you a $10 radio.
Well, my birthday is coming up as well as Christmas, so keep that in mind.
I don't need to keep that in mind. I would just send it to you anyways because it's just basic necessities. But the purpose of this...
every post-apocalypse movie, I should know better, but go on.
You absolutely should, considering we both are like highly into that stuff, and that's why we started gardening. But anyways, if you take a battery operated radio, I'm telling you, put it on the AM channel at night where there's like talk shows, that raccoon will stay away. And are you using fish fertilizer?
Well, why wouldn't I? I not now though, but I have been. Yeah,
because they will. I switched from fish fertilizer. I'm not using it right now. I got another organic water soluble fertilizer I'm using, and I haven't had the raccoon, hasn't come back. So yeah.
Well, I have outlets in my garage. Why wouldn't I just, for safety
That's true.
reasons,
Yeah.
we will get a battery-operated radio.
But yeah, if you have an outlet, absolutely. Just put it on a radio talk show because it makes them think there's people. Now, you live in a big city, so they may be able to drown it out. Where I am, it's dead silent at night. Dude, the woods behind my house are like, I'm not scared of the woods, but there's something on everybody I know. They're like, the woods behind our houses are creepy. It's weird. I don't know.
It's actually pretty, I may try that even with the cracking my kitchen window, because they are all over the garden, but they're like, if I go out with my eyes closed at 2 a.m. in the morning, I may step on a raccoon. Like, they're right at my back door, dude.
Oh, yeah.
It's
I
crazy.
would definitely do something then. Yeah, just a plug-in radio. But yeah, if you don't have battery off radio, let me know. I got you, boo. So, yeah, I forgot what we were talking about now.
We were at the wrap-up point of the things that we want y'all to consider as
the
we
harvest.
Frost.
Well, there's one big one. All right. You ready to get unsexy?
I'm always ready. I wake up ready to get unsexy.
That's what I'm talking about. You need to monitor your weather, okay? And it's simple as far as like, hey, look at your 10-day forecast. But I want to challenge everybody to take it a step further and actually learn a little bit about weather, because once you can see things, like you can watch the weatherman, and the weatherman will say, this, I'll tell you a couple things, but you'll be able to look out and see patterns and see cold fronts and stuff like that, and you'll be able to identify it before the weatherman will tell you. And I think it's really important for us to do that, especially as gardeners. I was just telling Batavia, and I'm going to forewarn everybody. You're probably going to hear me talk about this more because I'm totally obsessed at this point. I've been playing this farm simulator game, and it's very interesting. It's nothing to do with gardening. It's like a whole new world, which is part of the reason why I like it. But it's caused me to think about like farming at a big scale. This isn't like in this, if you play the game I have it on the Xbox. So, it's not like you're like, hey, I'm going to plant my field and harvest it. You're like working in other people's fields and stuff like that. And, I'm not from the heartland. I have farms all around me, but only part of the farm we typically see is what we see when we drive down the road. It's what's past the road that we don't really totally understand. And I'm not saying this gives me a total understanding, but I get that, like, you may see a farm that's got 5 different plots in it, but those 5 plots could be owned by 5 people, right? And they can have farms all over the area. They're not all just in one section. And I start thinking about it. I'm like, their livelihood is their crops, right? It's not like us where we're like, oh, boo, I lost my broccoli. Let me go to the grocery store and get one. They're like, oh, boo, I lost the broccoli. Ain't nobody getting broccoli, and I ain't getting a paycheck. So if you think about that and you put it into that perspective, what are they doing to stay ahead of these times of years? What steps are they taking? And the big part of, I guarantee you, farmers are like weathermen. They are mechanics. They are all of these different things wrapped up into one, so they can continue to produce and make this happen. And the monitoring the weather is a daily occurrence. Look, Batavia is weird. She's got like 5 different people's weather in her phone that she checks daily. She's doing it right now. Right now, she's looking down on her phone. Her eyebrows got all perked up. She's in it. So she's looking at my weather.
A fun, actually, the number of weathers. So Chicago, a city in Florida where I have family, Belize for vacation purposes, Paris for vacation purposes, Cancun for vacationing purposes, North Carolina, San Diego for potential relocation. Puerto Rico, I'm not quite sure why Puerto Rico is there. New York for friends. Indianapolis, family. Houston, family. Las Vegas, that's questionable. San Antonio, questionable. But yes, if you'd like me to add your city to my weather app,
Let
so
her
I can
know.
keep an eye on you and your garden and your family's well-being. Feel free to DM me.
You know what you should do? You should put in your phone for your own purposes. Let me think. Put in Raleigh, North Carolina.
To see the difference?
And to see the difference between me and them.
That's the reason why I'm weird. Probably more than keeping track of people that I love.
Yeah. Well,
Like, I'm weird because I'm super excited about being able to see the difference.
yeah, because it's a couple hours away from me, but you'll see the difference at certain times of the year, and you'll be like, "Oh, I get it now." Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it makes a big difference. But
there is this, until you live in for the folks in the States at least, until you live in a space that has significantly different weather across your state, you don't necessarily kind of get an everyday activity like, well, no. People that are in a suburb of Chicago or Illinois will have a different experience than me when I'm kind of in Center City, Chicago. And things could be so different from a weather perspective when it comes to the garden, where you're looking at damaged plants or not. You're looking at people planting earlier. You're looking at people that need to plant later. So yeah, that would be a good treat.
Yeah, check that out. Okay. So we've talked about the planter app, so definitely check out the link below for that. And we have a question of the day. Are you ready?
Question of the day. Yeah.
Okay. The question is, hey, Ben and Batavia, love the show. Batavia, this question is specifically for you. If I had potatoes that were starting to show eyes, would it be okay if I canned them? Just wanted to know because I'm absolutely curious. Thank you, Ben. So I have a question for you today. We have other questions, but this has been on top of mind, and I just wanted to get your intake on it.
Well, hey, Ben.
Hey, Batavia.
If they have eyes that you could rub off and they are not soft.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's the key. Then I think they're okay to can. If there is some softness, it depends on who you ask. So like kind of the letter of canning law would probably say, well, no, those are too mature. I am going to be right under that and say, I think they're okay. Some people even can potatoes once they start to go soft. That's where I'm going to draw the line. I'd still do a soaking of those potatoes as you cut them up before you can them. But yeah, I think that's a good way to not lose that particular harvest.
There you go. Yeah, we weighed it. We got 80 pounds of potatoes this year.
Get out. White potatoes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
we got that whole basket.
Pounds maybe
of
white potatoes. Pretty crappy potato year, but go on.
Yeah. Do you remember that list I told you about earlier?
Mm-hmm.
Potatoes was on that list.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So y'all will find out sooner than later. But so we didn't eat, but maybe maybe a quarter of them if we're lucky. Mm-hmm. So we've got and they all have beautiful eyes. Beautiful. So I'm actually thinking about planting them in the greenhouse to see how they run. A couple of them, and then may just stick the whole potato in just to use them up. But we're talking about going through and actually canning them as well. And I've gone back and forth about it. I've Googled it, but there's so many dumb questions out there, and so I was like, well, and I knew that you had canned them. So, and the one thing that both Batavia and I see eye to eye on when it comes to preserving is we don't take chances. Yeah. You cannot see, smell, or sense botulism at all. So we want to be very careful. And if I'm going to I've always said, because, potatoes take like an hour in the canner or something stupid like that. So if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do an entire canner load. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure. But we're going to have to reevaluate for next year, because if we do the same thing we did this year, which we plan to do, we're going to have to can them right away. I can't wait like this. So
yeah, there's potatoes do have it, unless you get really, really great conditions to store them, which I don't necessarily have. I've had potatoes last a couple of months. So if I start harvesting, actually, now that I'm speaking, if I start harvesting in August, I have canned them probably like at least no later than November. I did have some that I was able to put in. I take that back. At the beginning of December last year, as save-in, put them in the refrigerator in a brown paper bag for seed potatoes for this year. The bit I ironically just had, I'm going to say it was 22. I opened up a quart size can of potatoes that I didn't realize was kind of in the back of the cabinet. And I made mashed potatoes out of them because, the consistency, I mean, let's just say, just like with everything, as it ages, sometimes it loses its firmness.
Yeah.
So I had some mashed potatoes and they were just fine.
Good. Yeah, I just want to be careful. So I wanted to take this opportunity to spread the knowledge. And I was gonna type up an email and be like, look at this one, it's from a guy named Ben. But I was like,
well, yeah, this is,
and you didn't even say, hey Ben, you didn't even do that. That's messed up.
I gave all of it to you, man. Look, I will be consistent if nothing else. Well, this but the part about I love that question is, and then what you're already thinking about, clearly, because I know you, and of course you are, is, all right, let's think about, all things are equal, what am I going to do next year? Am I going to try to get the same type of harvest? And if I do, all right, now I know going in, I'm not going to sit and let these potatoes kind of sit dormant for, it's probably been a couple of months since you guys harvested those, right? I was going to say
3
about
months.
6 weeks, but I feel like it's been longer.
It's about the 4th month. So it's time to poop or get off the pot.
Yeah. And do you add that to your list earlier in the, I guess late summer to get those canned, or shortly thereafter? I mean, just, for notes, the best time to can them would have been
right away.
Yeah, right away.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I'm looking at it now is I'm not going to try and grow less. I'm going to try and grow more. Mm-hmm. I just need to can them, freeze them, stuff like that, because we don't eat a lot of white potatoes. Believe it or not, that's not really I love them. They're amazing, but we don't crush them. So, we want to make sure that we definitely are using them, but because they don't have as long, a sweet potato lasts a year. Yeah. They don't have as long of a shelf life. How can we spread that out? You know what I mean?
Dude, I am not exaggerating when I say last week, I don't remember even this happening. When I started my sweet potato slips this year, I started them using last year's harvest, and I didn't. So this would have been probably March or something. And I had sweet potatoes still that were looking good. And I didn't go ahead and eat them because I wasn't sure how many more slips I was going to start.
Yeah.
And I didn't. I just used I don't know, maybe I had 3 potatoes or something. And so I was down bumping around in the basement last week, and I'm like, wait a minute. It's a box, and it's just, maybe a handful. I don't even know if the idea of I went to check on my sweet potatoes, this is back in September, when you guys hear this, and there's sweet potatoes standing straight up out of the soil. Right. They're in the cage maybe this year. And so I'm like, okay, let me just pull this one out. There's no sense in trying to, put soil back on it. And so then I was same day in the basement and I found sweet potatoes and I'm like, they were firm. And so I put them in the air fryer, dude, just as delicious. So that is sweet potatoes that would have been harvested in October of last year, were edible and enjoyable in September of the following year. Every sweet potato may not last that long, but yeah, I have a few more that I'm going to enjoy.
Yeah, and I was thinking the other day too, I need to find a better way to store all these storage crops. So I was kind of looking around, thinking about it, and my wife, she's smarter than she thinks she is sometimes. She doesn't really do a lot with the garden. Mm-hmm. She kind of does, I'm like, hey, do this, and she'll do it, which is very rare. And then when it comes, the job in the house, we're very classic. We each have certain jobs. And I do everything outside. And she does a lot inside, not everything. But so when it comes to the growing the food, I grow it. And she generally will prepare it, or I want to say preserve it, but she's kind of gotten away from that, which is okay. But she took one of those, you know how you can get those miniature laundry baskets? Mm-hmm. And she had stored some stuff in there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The short ones,
the short ones. I think I'm going to try and go like the Dollar Tree and pick up a couple just to do it. So, it's airflow, space, so I think I'm going to start storing stuff in those. I got a lot of Seminole pumpkins this year, but they might not store too well in those. But when I say store too well, I just mean be too many. But I think it will help with promoting rot and stuff like that.
Since this sweet potato harvest, which we didn't, I might as well toss them in with root crops. I don't think we mentioned sweet potatoes in particular. I'm going to harvest my sweet potatoes before the frost. And if I run out of time, I'm covering them with a blanket and then coming in. This year, I won't have that opportunity because they've gone wild, right? So I'm going to get in there and dig those up. But if you go to any stores that have like you bag your own grocery kind of thing, so your Sam's Clubs, your Costco's, your Aldi, that's it's near me. Like I am a collector of those boxes. So whatever the produce come in, and so they mostly have like a place where you can handle on either side where you can lift it. And so as I shop, I put my groceries in those boxes and I keep those boxes. And those have been great for me because I'm not dealing with, 70, 80, 90 pounds of produce. For my white potatoes and for my sweet potatoes, I can put them in there and lay them in a single layer and stuff them away in the back of the basement. Trouble with that is out of sight, out of mind. That's how I got, sweet potatoes, and I didn't eat over the last year. That wasn't intentional,
Yeah.
But anywho, if you're looking for a way, this year I also did for, we've talked about this a little bit, for where my grow lights and everything are, they're the shelving units. And so right now I don't have a lot growing, and this may change next year. So I don't have anything growing under the lights. So I've used those to lay out my onions, which are completely set and ready to be officially stored away. So they've cured. And I also laid my garlic out. If that was in an area that I didn't think would get a whole lot of exposure to light, I would lay my potatoes out there too. But we're just months away from starting for next year's garden again.
I know, it's
literally
crazy.
So that's not the best place for long-term storage of those kind of root crops. So
okay, we did it. You made it through your first frost. Now we just have to figure out what to do afterwards. The goal with all of this is to keep the gardener active throughout the off season. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm, I think a lot of the times when I've done that it's really, it's helped dramatically for my next year or so. Whoa. Man, my pen dried up. Makes me mad. Anyways, everybody, thank you so much for listening to the Backyard Gardens podcast. Please check us out. All of our social medias, stuff like that. Batavia's at Be Better Garden on YouTube. I am at Sandy Bottom Homestead on YouTube. Become a subscriber. Become a patron. And also get some seeds. So we do offer free shipping if you order $35 or more. And we will be having tomatoes and peppers and all those fun things coming up very soon. So go bookmark the page. Link is below. Thank you very much. And remember, on the Backyard Gardens podcast, we will continue to learn to grow and grow for change.
See ya.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Well, we hope you enjoyed the show, and thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so by checking out our seed shop below. We have all kinds of seeds available for you, and we're going to be adding new seeds shortly, so check that out. Get yourself some seeds. It's free shipping, over $35 orders. So go ahead, get a full garden. What are you waiting for? Order your seeds and stock up. Or you can become a subscriber. You can either be an Apple subscriber or a patron, and that will help support the show. You'll get one free episode every month, an extra episode, that is. So we definitely would love to see you over there and become part of our crew. Join the Backyard Gardens community garden in Facebook. That's free. go ahead, join that, and join the community where all the listeners get together and they can help each other out with their trials and tribulations and just show off their gardens. There's not a better way to do it. And if you're curious about what's going on in our gardens, you can check out our individual YouTube channels. So I'm at Sandy Bottom Homestead and Batavia's at Be Better Garden. You can check that out and see how each of us are growing and what we talk about on those, because a lot of times we will coincide with the podcast and help add information in that maybe we didn't get out in the show or we feel that's pertinent at a certain time of year. So check that out and enjoy seeing our gardens and what we do in them. And we have an Amazon store which has all the products that we use and recommend in our gardens, and it helps support our show. And we also add to this list periodically, so be sure to check it out periodically to see if there's anything that you need for your garden. Everything that you do, including a like and a subscribe and even a review, will help us learn to grow and grow for change.
See ya.